problem in the world isn't caused by the president. When that train derailed in East Palestine, it wasn't because Trump deregulated the brakes. These aren't news stories. They're storylines pumped into your bubble. 4, always be aware that once the news became a profit division of media companies, they stopped being in the news business and are now in the audience stroking business. The goal is no longer to inform opinions, it's to reinforce them. 3, if your news outlet consistently reduces everything that happens in the world to who the president of America is, get rid of it. It's just thoughtless, reflexive team politics. Trust me, no one lighting a tire fire in Haiti is thinking, I wouldn't have done this under Trump, but given the weakness of the Biden administration, why not?
Bill Maher has gone head-to-head with the mainstream media, accusing them of blowing stories far out of proportion. According to him, we're living in a time where major outlets like CNN and MSNBC are often criticized for inflating issues simply to grab attention and boost ratings. Bill Maher, who has long been skeptical of that approach, recently called out what he sees as a pattern of bias within mainstream media, particularly when it comes to coverage of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. His criticism was sharp, direct, and completely unapologetic. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into the story.
Reported this year that the U.S. was on track for nearly a 300% increase in measles cases. 300%? Wow, that sounds like it could be millions. It was 35. Because they just want to manipulate you into clicking. Look, I have 10 fingers. You want to see me suddenly have 80% less? So, please. Okay. 5, never trust the initial reports. The media cares way more about being first than being right. They love a scoop, but it's a scoop of shit because it always turns out to be wrong.
If you've been paying attention to the mainstream media over the past year, you probably understand exactly what Bill Maher is talking about. There appears to be a pattern developing, one that feels less like balanced reporting and more like deliberate exaggeration. Stories involving Donald Trump or the Republican Party often seem to be amplified, dramatized, and rushed to air before every detail is fully confirmed. The moment a negative headline about Donald Trump surfaces, it spreads rapidly across television networks and social media platforms. In the process, nuance disappears and important context gets pushed aside, while the race to be first replaces the responsibility to be accurate. Bill Maher argues that this constant rush towards sensational headlines doesn't just damage the credibility of the media, it also fuels growing public distrust. When audiences begin to feel that stories are exaggerated or selectively framed, they stop believing the coverage altogether. In trying so aggressively to expose Donald Trump, the media may actually be weakening its own authority.
You have to care about the truth. The media doesn't care about it because they know you don't care, but you just want to hear your side. So at some point, you need to take a step back, look around, and be really honest. Are you actually as fucked as your news feed tells you you are? Are you miserable? Some people are, and we should help them. Are you destitute? Some people are, and we should help them. But most people who take the subway get to work alive. Most don't fall out of a plane with a missing door.
Bill Maher's criticism resonates with many people because it reflects a larger problem in modern media culture. News feeds today often deliver half-developed stories, not necessarily because journalists lack information, but because audiences have become used to consuming quick, emotionally satisfying narratives. Many viewers on the political left aren't always tuning in to challenge their beliefs or hear uncomfortable facts. Instead, they're often looking for coverage that reinforces what they already think about politics, Donald Trump, and the Republican Party. That demand creates a powerful incentive for networks to frame stories in ways that mirror the feelings of their core audience. The result becomes a feedback loop. The audience expects a certain narrative, the media provides it, and both sides grow more entrenched in the process. It's one reason these outlets continue attracting large, loyal audiences. People don't just come for information, they come for validation. In that environment, nuance fades, skepticism weakens, and commentary often replaces careful, balanced reporting.
Trump could absolutely blow up the world on day one of term two. He's a dangerous, erratic, insane, awful person, and I'd love to help him get not elected. But he didn't actually start World War III last time, or nuke a hurricane, or trade Puerto Rico for Greenland. Sure. Sure, the sequel is usually worse, but until he does, I'm going to live my life and not the one the media wants me to live, hating half the country and shitting my pants 24/7. Is the sky really falling? I don't know. Maybe. And maybe it's just the door from a Boeing airplane.
Many people on the political left are genuinely worried about the return of Donald Trump to power. Some fear his leadership could push global politics towards serious conflict. That anxiety has been amplified by certain media narratives where almost every foreign policy decision is framed as a potential step toward World War III. However, critics like Bill Maher argue that this perspective overlooks an important part of Donald Trump's political approach: his pragmatism. Trump has often approached international issues less as a rigid ideologue and more like a negotiator who believes in leverage, pressure, and deal-making. Pragmatic leaders tend to focus on outcomes rather than dramatic escalation. According to Maher, fear-driven narratives don't always reflect reality. Instead of staying inside media bubbles that constantly reinforce worst-case scenarios, he encourages people, especially on the left, to broaden their perspective, listen to opposing views, and step outside the echo chamber shaping their political fears.
It's time for the media to admit that they blew the whole thing way out of proportion, because as always with media these days, they don't cover what's most important, just what's most fun to watch. There are 15.2 million college students in the U.S., and 2,300 have been arrested. That's 1/67th of 1%, and half of the ones in New York weren't even students. But we were given the false impression that these protesters are the voice of their generation, having found a cause for which they were willing to go to the tents and to the barricades. Oh, please, these kids are more violent when their team wins a champion.
Bill Maher points to a recent example that, in his opinion, perfectly demonstrates how the media can inflate a small event into a national spectacle. A small group of students organized a protest on a college campus, something that happens fairly regularly across universities in the United States. Yet within hours, several media outlets framed the demonstration as if it represented a massive nationwide student uprising. Headlines and commentary made it sound like campuses across the country were erupting in outrage, when in reality, it was only a relatively small group making noise. According to Maher, this type of exaggeration isn't accidental. By magnifying minor incidents and presenting them as major national movements, the media can create the impression of widespread opposition. And more often than not, the focus of that narrative ends up being the same person, the president, Donald Trump. Maher argues that constantly magnifying every small protest or controversy distorts reality and unnecessarily heightens public anxiety.
A Harvard youth poll proved it. They asked people 18 to 29 what issues mattered most to them, and out of 16 choices, Palestine came in 15. The vast majority just wanted to do what they went to college for in the first place, to experiment with being a lesbian. But when these kids chant, the whole world is watching, they're right. But only because you assholes with the cameras won't show anything else. Isn't there a bear in a swimming pool somewhere you should be covering?
According to Bill Maher, stories that present calm, balanced reporting often don't receive the same attention. In today's media environment, outrage tends to sell far better than measured analysis. Networks know that the quickest way to keep viewers glued to their screens is by presenting stories that spark anger, fear, or frustration. In many ways, outrage has become a kind of business model. The stronger the emotional reaction, the higher the engagement, and the higher the ratings. As a result, instead of focusing on ordinary developments or balanced viewpoints, coverage often leans towards stories that inflame passions. Panel discussions grow louder. Headlines become more dramatic, and political disagreements are framed as if they were national emergencies. The goal is no longer just informing the public, it's capturing attention in a fiercely competitive media market. And in that race for attention, outrage often proves far more profitable than calm journalism.
I thought as a public service, since it's so hard to find reliable news these days, tonight I would provide a few rules of thumb for trying to follow the news in our modern age. Starting with, if the headlines in your preferred news outlet routinely feature words like shreds, destroys, pummels, bashes, your outlet is a partisan piece of shit. Either that or you're reading a Batman comic. Ditto with obliterates, roasts, annihilates, and owns. You're supposed to be a source for information, not Nikki Glaser at the Tom Brady roast.
At the same time, Bill Maher isn't arguing that strong headlines should disappear entirely. When someone genuinely dismantles a controversial policy or challenges a left-leaning philosophy with solid arguments, then a bold headline can be justified. Strong language isn't automatically dishonest if it accurately reflects what actually happened. The real problem begins when the headline promises explosive drama that the content simply doesn't deliver. That's the key distinction Maher is trying to highlight. His criticism isn't that media outlets should never use dramatic wording, it's that those words must match reality. If a discussion truly exposes flaws in an argument or policy, then a headline highlighting that clash makes sense. But when headlines exaggerate or oversell the story just to attract readers, credibility suffers. Audiences start to feel manipulated, and trust in the outlet begins to fade. Maher's broader message is simple. Dramatic framing should follow the facts, not replace them.
2, any news source that quotes the internet or writes Twitter says or a bunch of hacks too lazy to do real journalism. You can pretend you wrote a piece on the zeitgeist, but what you really did was look on your phone and quote the 3 angriest people with the most time on their hands.
This part of Bill Maher's argument actually carries a bit of humor, because many viewers already know which outlets he's hinting at. Critics say that instead of doing the difficult work that traditional journalism requires, digging into sources, verifying information, and providing context, some outlets take shortcuts. One common example is relying heavily on social media reactions and presenting those comments as if they represent the broader public. A few tweets suddenly become what people are saying, and a handful of online reactions are treated like a nationwide trend. Critics argue that this shortcut replaces real investigation with confirmation bias. According to them, this practice appears especially common in certain left-leaning media spaces, where social media sentiment sometimes gets treated as evidence. The end result is coverage that feels less like journalism and more like a carefully curated echo chamber designed to reinforce the audience's existing views.
If your news outlet consistently reduces everything that happens in the world to who the president of America is, get rid of it. It's just thoughtless, reflexive team politics. Trust me, no one lighting a tire fire in Haiti is thinking, I wouldn't have done this under Trump, but given the weakness of the Biden administration, why not?
Bill Maher has also criticized what he sees as an obsession among some left-leaning outlets with connecting almost every major event back to Donald Trump. Economic developments, cultural debates, international conflicts, somehow the conversation often circles back to him. Maher's argument is that this fixation has reached the point where Trump becomes the explanation for nearly every headline, whether the connection truly exists or not. Of course, Donald Trump, as the President of the United States, naturally influences global politics. His decisions do carry international consequences. But that doesn't automatically make him responsible for every political controversy or policy dispute that appears in the news cycle. By forcing every story through the Trump lens, the media risks oversimplifying complex issues. Maher suggests that this approach not only distorts reality, but also traps the public in a constant cycle of outrage instead of encouraging deeper understanding.
The problem in the world isn't caused by the president. When that train derailed in East Palestine, it wasn't because Trump deregulated the brakes and the container ship didn't hit the bridge because of Biden's woke DEI agenda. These aren't news stories. They're storylines pumped into your bubble. 4, always be aware that once the news became a profit division of media companies, they stopped being in the news business and are now in the audience stroking business. The goal is no longer to inform opinions, it's to reinforce them. Walter Cronkite used to say, that's the way it is. Now it's, That's our story, and we're sticking to it.
In the end, Bill Maher's message isn't really about defending Donald Trump. Instead, it's about challenging the way modern media operates. When every story is exaggerated, every protest becomes a nationwide uprising, and every political development is linked back to one individual, the public eventually begins to question the credibility of the coverage. Sensationalism might boost ratings in the short term, but it also slowly erodes trust. Maher's critique serves as a reminder that journalism works best when accuracy comes before outrage and context comes before narrative. Viewers also have a role to play. Rather than staying trapped in media bubbles that reinforce their existing beliefs, people should seek out different perspectives and examine issues more critically. A healthier media environment depends on both responsible reporting and audiences willing to think beyond the headlines. And with that, we've reached the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.